Are you sick and tired of the same old legal tech conversations? Do you pine for something new? Hey, me too. Here's the good news. We've got something entirely novel, just for you and for thousands of other listeners. But forget about them right now. It's just me and you talking. Welcome to the Adventures in Legal Tech podcast. On the show, we'll explore effective solutions to unique technology issues. In every episode, you'll leave with actionable next steps that you can use to solve the everyday technology problems you're facing in your law practice. It's like Extreme Home Makeover, Law Edition. I'm your host, Jared Correia. I'm the CEO of Red Cave Law Firm Consulting, and I talk tech with lawyers nearly every damn day. Just think of me as a less intriguing Tom Waits, and we'll do just fine. Now, everybody says that they're going to show you how to use legal tech the right way, but we actually mean it. Here's why and how. Each episode, we're going to lay out a specific pain point in detail so you'll know exactly where we're headed. Then, after we've laid out the problem, our guest will tell us how to solve it. We've got down-to-earth tech commentary you can understand and then execute on so you can get access to all those amazing technology features you've heard so much about. Now, without further ado, our vexing problem for this week is as follows. Lawyers, like Carmen Electra and her support staff, paralegals, and administrative assistants are at the forefront of subject matter expertise in legal. Traditionally, these folks have been the furthest away from participating in developing technology and tools which directly relate to the work they're doing. Vibe coding is now a viable bridge to make tangible tools within the grasp of those without a technical background. Vibe coding is AI-assisted software development where users create applications by instructing AI agents in natural language rather than writing code line by line. In law, this can rapidly and fundamentally change who participates in innovation and how legal products can be deployed and developed. Now, if that sounds smarter than my usual hypothetical, that's because we have our guest, Max Paterson, who's the managing director for the United States at Brighter, who wrote that for me. Max,
but
welcome
you say
to the
it
show.
so well. Thank you for having me, but you say it so well. See,
Dramatic readings are my specialty.
Lots of practice. You can talk. It's fantastic.
How can law firms, law firm owners, law firm staff get into vibe coding? And anything else you want to say about it definitionally that's important?
Actually, definitionally, there's one thing I'll point out, like how hot is this? Because it's also buzzword hype, all this stuff, but it's so hot that Collins Dictionary listed vibe coding as their word of the year last year. Like that's not a legal thing, right? That's just a across the board AI thing. So when we're talking about this topic, I can imagine that there are many podcasts all over the place going, what's vibe coding for law? What's vibe coding for accounting? What's vibe, it's
right.
Getting everywhere.
We're just another in the long line of vibe coding in ... podcasts.
Exactly. But I think though, there is something unique here. And I genuinely think there's, like, in law, especially, the old trope of, lawyers being technophobic, of law being the last to implement anything, right? Like all of our collective time on the legal tech side, right? That's what we've been hearing for years. But the funny thing is, doesn't that make for such an exciting ecosystem where if you build something, you can make an even bigger impact, right? It's not a loud space. We were talking about sort of offline how, there's never been more investment in legal tech. There's never been more new people getting involved, which is really cool. Private equity, like you said, is getting involved, all this cool stuff. What about the democratization of actually the people who are practicing law, and the extension of the people supporting the people practicing law can start to do it themselves? So for a definition, that's sort of like the big vision here. That's
an interesting angle. So the last guest I had on last week, we were talking about the fact that lawyers are generally late adopters, but AI seems to be different. Like, I feel like a lot of lawyers are jumping in. And then the vibe coding thing, it's interesting that you use the term democratize, because I kind of felt the same way about cloud software. Like, that democratized expenses for law firms such that I could now compete as a small law firm. Do you see like the same thing happening with vibe coding? Okay.
Yeah, the same thing happening. And I think there's two parts to that. One part is, why is the uptick of this or something a little more closer to the type of work that lawyers do? I think it has to do with how AI fundamentally works, and also how, in extension, vibe coding works.
Yeah.
Really what vibe coding is you're taking an idea from your head, from the ether, from your experience, and you're able to build something tangible. I'll say that, but it's a digital product usually. Build something digital without a development team, a design team, right? It's a really more of a one-to-one journey. And, the one thing lawyers and people that surround lawyers, the main commodity that we deal in is words, right? We're
Yeah.
used to drafting things. We're used to explaining very complicated, like if you look at what a patent lawyer
Natural
does, right?
language coding is like right up the lawyer's alley. I agree.
Right. When you're trying to be as exact as possible in a court proceeding, or when you're drafting a memo, like words matter, periods matter,
Yeah.
commas matter, context matters, and these are all the things that can directly translate into how people can effectively use AI, but also how AI can then build stuff based on those words and you expressing your ideas. Yeah.
Is it possible to get over your skis though? Vibe coding.
It absolutely is. And I think one of the big elements and themes that it's almost like a reality check every once in a while. Like, yes, this is exciting and fun to experiment. And I think it is a fantastic proof of concept builder, call it an MVP, minimum viable product, or,
Yeah.
what is, or prototyping tool. It's fantastic. But if you are looking at, executing legal work through tools that you're building through prompts, right? The tool isn't just about what it does. Does it have the right security protocols? Is the infrastructure secure, right? Can you actually put client data in there? Where's it stored? Where is this processed? All of the other, user interface, user experience stuff. So can you get in the deep end really quick? Absolutely. But I think it does bring you a little closer to that, thinking of the legal services that you're deploying as possibly productizing some of them. Because the other side of the coin is also,
Right.
there's a lot of legal processes that are still within firms, within corporate legal, even within sole practitioners, at sort of all levels, within admin staff, support staff, which high volume, highly repetitive tasks, those are the types of, maybe they're not even that complex. Those are the types of things where you
Yeah.
can really dig in. Yeah.
That's fine. I was talking to a managing partner at a law firm this morning, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm just vibe coding this app. Do you think I can do it?" And I was like, "No." For that very reason. I'm like, there's so much shit you're not even thinking about. Like, can you
Absolutely.
get it to work? Yeah. But what about all these ancillary considerations? You're not a software developer. You're not a CIO. Like, come on.
Yeah. Is it
Um,
compliant with your privacy policy? Like, I don't know. Like, AI is going
the
to tell me
product,
whether it is. Yeah.
right, right. And obviously, like, the answer to that is like, I'll just ask the AI. And now you're doing vibe other things, and we'll see how all that goes. The productization piece is interesting, though. Do you have thoughts on what some examples could look like as far as that's concerned?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, a little bit of background, that's basically what I've been doing in legal tech for the past 10 years is,
Oh, I,
help.
I don't know if we were recording this part, but you told me you won like a global hackathon, right? That's
I did
nuts.
actually, when I first started in legal tech. So lawyer is a background, but moved into sort of the vendor side in legal technology. And 2017 was around when I got started, 2016, 2017. And
Yeah.
the global legal hackathon was a brand new idea. It was that let's do a legal based hackathon around the world. You have sort of your city, your country, and then you go to this championship. And that was one of
The
the first
hacking
things.
Olympic.
Yeah, it was one of the first things I ever did. And actually the project, it was me and another person, both sort of, I'd call us non-technical, but we were able to build stuff. It was a legal voice app. Is the
Mm,
idea would be, how can you access legal information through voice? Because Google Homes, Alexas, all those were sort of everywhere, those things that we could put on every lawyer's desk.
Oh my God.
Fast forward 10 years later, and now, yeah, you got
Can I tell you, like,
ChatGPT
I
and
just,
Siri and
my newest thing is like, I try to check the time on the phone when I'm doing like podcasts and stuff just to make sure we're on time. And now when I hit the old button for checking the time, it brings up Google Gemini and starts talking to me, bucking up my shit.
just what you need is another voice in your ear, right? When you're trying,
right, exactly. Another voice in my head. Are you seeing a lot of experimentation in terms of vibe coding by lawyers themselves? Because I'm seeing it personally.
Yeah. You know what? It still is a mix because like lawyers should be practicing the law, right? That's one. So I see it as passion projects. I see it as, tiger teams at firms. So I think there's been more sandbox tool access than there ever has been for lawyers. And it's funny, the firms are mixed in terms of their approach. Some firms are actually like the coolest one I've heard was someone was allocating innovation hours. So just like they would pro bono hours.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And it's given these lawyers real time that would count towards their annual time allotments, because obviously they have numbers to hit for bonuses and everything else, partnership track, all that. But it's just to explore innovation projects, which is kind of cool because they've used those to build something or work with the innovation team if you're at a bigger firm, or just to give yourself some space. So short answer is yes, lawyers are getting more involved with this. And also there's a rogue element of it too, right? Is like,
oh yeah.
There are,
can we get into shadow AI a little bit?
Absolutely. Like shadow IT was the big fear, and now it's shadow AI, like just moving where it needs to. Yeah. And because these tools are so prevalent, right? If you Google right now of like, front end vibe coding tool, you're going to get a huge list. You're going to get free trials. You're even going to get, the barrier to entry on some of these are $20 a month, right? $40 a month.
Yeah.
Right? Something that you can get into. Now, do you run into some of those other problems we mentioned, which are going to be like, yes, security, client data, infrastructure, a lot of that, but at least you're getting to express something digitally tangible that you can then put at least a half-baked idea together to go hand off to the innovation team or someone that's a bit more technical. So I think this is a bit of the bridge where what starts in the shadows, so this shadow AI part, has the potential to actually come within the infrastructure and within the world of IT and innovation and KM and all that good stuff. Yeah.
I just did that Google search as you requested, and I think I saw like 100 apps on page one. So if anybody's interested, and I didn't even look at the AI overview. I just looked at the search results. Let's let's talk about your background a little bit, because you have an interesting background. Walk me through like what you did up to the point that you went with Brighter, and then we'll talk a little bit about Brighter. So like, how did you get into the law? How did you decide to kind of move away from traditional practice?
Absolutely. So here's a bit of a zag. I started making TV commercials. I started doing
as an actor?
Videos. No, as a production behind the scenes. So my background is in sort of communications, mixed media, particularly video. And I was doing an internship here in New York, and they had no clearance or licensing rights for any of the people or locations or music that they shot. And so
sounds like an issue.
Right. It's, and so we had to repaper. And so in doing that process, I realized like, and it sounds really mundane to a lot of people, but it sounds like, hey, this is kind of great. There's this whole legal aspect to this production side. Like, so I made it, and you know what I did? I made a database, and we were, had the online file drops, and you could sort of like build this stuff together. So I finished the internship and realized, what wouldn't it be great to go get a professional degree and go a little deeper? So that's what led me to law school. I'm from Canada, so finished up there. And while I was in law school in Canada, I had this really cool opportunity to do a semester in Silicon Valley. So Stanford, has a center called Codex, which is right between the law department and computer science. Yeah. And so I was a visiting research fellow there, and
Hmm.
that's where I caught the legal tech bug. This was around 2010, 2011, oh, maybe a little later, 2012. Yeah. And it was Lex Machina was coming out, and there was a
Oh
cool
yeah.
product called Ravel, and like they were trying to, predict what judges would, how they'd make their decisions. It was neural nets and really cool stuff,
Yeah.
really cool stuff. So that's what got me hooked. Like it was the people, but it was the tools. And so went back to Canada with sort of this reinvigorated sense of what's possible in this industry. And then eventually worked for a bit for the government, did some policy stuff, but eventually came to New York City and did my master's in law, just focusing on legal technology and entrepreneurship. And I did that at Cornell Tech. And from there, I made it known I want to be the legal tech person. I want to, dive into this as deep
Mhm.
as possible. And after that, I ended up working in no code, low code,
Yeah.
working directly with law firms and corporate legal to productize some of their services to help them take control of the innovation journey. And then over the course of my time at the first company, I taught a course on legal AI. I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to teach again this year,
Oh,
go
great.
back to Cornell and teach. Yeah. And then that brought me to Brighter and really clicked with the Brighter
I
team
like
here.
how this all started because you were like, bro, we're not going to get Stairway to Heaven for this commercial.
Yeah,
And
that's
now your whole career is spun off.
and it's funny. There are bits and pieces of learnings along each step of the way of going, you know what? There's a lot of connected pieces between what you would put together in a production and what goes into, project managing a legal
Yeah.
case or productizing some of the services. Like and I think that's also coming back to what we said right off the bat on the show is like, vibe coding is everywhere, but what's the legal side of that? What's the special sauce or something nuanced to legal? And I think it's been especially exciting lately is because lots of people are getting involved that otherwise haven't in the industry.
Mhm.
It's not just, oh, I'm a reformed lawyer, when people are getting up
Oh
to
my God.
speak at a meetup or something. It's, people that have no idea about law, but are sort of jumping in with fresh eyes. So,
Which I think is great. Yeah, I like that a lot too. Okay, so you're
yep.
at Brighter.
Mhm.
What does Brighter do?
Yeah. So Brighter has sort of two sides at the moment. So we have been around for 8 years, which I always like to point out because there are so many, legal tech companies that have spun up just in the past few years, which is great. But, we are completely purpose built for the legal industry. That's what our tools focus on. And through that, we have a workflow engine, an automation engine, a no code engine, essentially, where you can scope, build, deploy, maintain your own apps without a development or design team. And those apps are legal apps. We have the features and functionalities to do that. There could be
Right.
integrations. So that's sort of like the main, try, tested and true. With the emergence of AI, like a lot of companies that have been around the industry for a while, they're hit a point about 2 years ago, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter for some, where you had to reassess where the marketplace is going, where you had to sort of understand that AI isn't something that was hype. It wasn't something that was going back in the box,
A fad.
like initially, that there might have been something there. Chat GPT was really cool and people started asking legal questions, but then the staying power of the speed and sophistication that came with it
Yeah.
is pretty rad. So we have now integrated AI into the tool in two ways. One is you can use AI as a tool. So like you're building your apps and let's say you have a memo and then you need to fill out a whole bunch of documents based on that memo. Well, you can build an
Mhm.
app where you upload it. AI can extract, you can summarize, you can do doc automation, integrations, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But also the vibe coding part of things is you can now build the apps with a prompt. Is that you can
Yes.
tell the engine, hey, I want to build an anti-money laundering app for South Africa, based on the recent legislation changes. Or like you can, and it'll ask you questions. It's sort of that more chat-based environment where you can get subject matter experts a lot closer to the deployment. But the cool part is because we already have an existing ecosystem, is that those apps are built within, SOC 2, ISO 27001, they're in
Yeah.
an
Which is
environment where
nice.
Yeah.
So not
Where
free
you tick the box.
ChatGPT.
Not free ChatGPT where everything you put into all your client data becomes public and it's learning on the, it's training the model on it.
Yes. All right. So a lot of shit going on, clearly, in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of economic shifts do you think we'll be seeing for lawyers and law firms if you want to put on your prognostication hat
Yeah.
for a moment?
I know there's a lot of development happening on both sort of the client end and the service provider end, meaning that corporate legal is moving just as fast with AI, vibe coding, app building, productization, operational efficiency as law firms are. So it's created a pretty cool ecosystem where law firms are starting to understand that services are great and legal services are always going to be the core of the business, but there's also an element that they can start productizing some of those services. So law firms are really starting to experiment with their economic model. There's also cool things happening with people sort of testing the waters on new types of law firms, right? Completely remote first and partner only.
Yes.
There was a firm in the UK that got approved last year to be completely AI driven.
Yeah.
It was Garfield, something like that. But I think they're doing small claims cases under £10,000. Like there's cool stuff happening. And I think what we see from a lot of the big firms is they're sort of coming around to the idea of, and a lot of them are starting to experiment with the idea of we can complement the legal services we provide our clients with products. So that could mean internal facing tools so they can move faster and, understand their margins a bit better to experiment with flat fee billing work, right? Or maybe putting a product in there, here's some tax advice we gave you on this new import export law. And here's a little tool that we're also providing you so you can do some self-service stuff. And the self-service stuff is pretty cool because they can also look at subscription-based billing, pay per use. Like there's lots of flexibility. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's happening. Yeah.
Let's go in a completely different direction. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I'm going to send everybody to your LinkedIn profile now. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile earlier today to gather some data on you. And your cover photo appears to have some sort of hoverboard on it. Can you confirm or deny what this item is?
Yeah. So
I hope it's a hoverboard. Don't disappoint me, please.
Okay. So it's going to be a little disappointing, but it's my attempt to be a little cool. So also with our workflow engine, we put out and have developed a more chat-based AI tool specifically for lawyers. Really simple to use, like really simple, comes in at a great area in the market, sort of similar to a Lagora Harvey, very approachable, accessible. So we did that and it's called Beeman AI. And we were going through the naming process and we were coming up with logos and stuff. And I thought, I got to see the logo in a different context. So I'm like, what's a cool thing? A skateboard. And so I actually went.
Hope's a hoverboard.
Right. You're right on there. I went to, I think it was ChatGPT at the time, you can make a photo. I said, okay, take our logo and put it on a skateboard and make it seem cool. So that's what it is. It's the unofficial brighter Beeman AI skateboard. Yeah.
I was thrown off by the lack of wheels.
That's
Maybe
what it is.
Just tell people it's a hoverboard from now on.
I should. Like,
what's cooler than a skateboard? A hoverboard.
Absolutely. But you know what I should do? Like really lean into the hoverboard and take it back into AI and say, okay, make this full Back to the Future grade, Marty McFly level. Yeah.
That would be very dope. I'd be on board with that. Before I let you go, let's do a little bit more on the vibe coding stuff. You kind of alluded to this before, like non-legal, quote unquote, non-legal people coming into the industry to work on stuff. So how does the vibe coding aspect open up the legal tech marketplace for people who have not been able to participate effectively before? And who are those people? Are they investors? Are they software developers? Are they legal consumers? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everyone. Why don't I start with the sort of investment side of things, right? A lot of VCs do have legal backgrounds, but generally it was a more specific type of person that invested in sort of the legal tech space because you kind of got to know the industry, how law firms work. You want to be informed a bit, but that has just grown, exponentially. The numbers, even just for this year alone, of where investment's gone, in addition to private equity entering the ring to, really look at businesses in a different way. I think the other element is when you look at the founder level of the industry, is that this is anecdotal, and I think I got this from Nikki Shaver over at Legal Tech Hub, is that so Codex does a conference every year at Stanford, and I guess it's it fills a room, but there was like standing room only for a while, and like people were lining the walls and all this stuff. And again, anecdotal, I'm getting this secondhand, is that I guess someone had gone into one of the first year Stanford computer science classes, and they were asking, okay, big tech's been around for a long time. A lot of industries have, very well ingrained ecosystems for, not a lot of white space. Are there any industries that are relatively untouched? And someone said, whoever the speaker was, said law. Like law is this kind of the place that
it's kind of true.
Yeah. And so it's sort of garnered this excitement from people that technically don't have a legal background, but maybe one of the founders does in a team, or they can piece enough together. There's some pretty famous stories even of current founders that have sort of, slept in offices or bought people lunch to try and understand a bit more of the nuances of legal, to try and come at it from that entrepreneurial level. And then the last piece, which is, it's actually, when I started my first job in legal tech, my purview was education institutions and pro bono. I think the other element of this is, there's all these stats, Legal Services Corporation, Pro Bono Net, all these organizations that do really great work that, 20% of the addressable legal needs are met in the US, right?
There's this whole latent market that people have been talking about forever.
The access to justice gap is huge. There was another stat that came up. I think it was like, there's 20 million civil cases that are filed in state court every year. And I think there's like a crazy stat. It's like 75% of those have at least one of the parties do not have legal representation or do not have an attorney. So there's, I think, also a tremendous opportunity here on the consumer level, which I think traditional legal tech has always, been a more B2B, other than like the Rocket Lawyers and the LegalZooms and a lot of those. But there still is a huge addressable market for people to get legal services and interact with the law in sort of a unique way.
Do you have some favorite vibe coding tools?
I do. Well, Brighter, of course, is a wonderful one. But you know what? Of course, is that, Lovable, I always think people are using these tools and building with their eyes and things like that, is the user experience, user interface portion of things, how it looks, how it feels, what do buttons say, how do they, like, I always like that design element of things. So Lovable is a pretty cool one to mock things up, and other design tools, things like that. I also think there's some pretty cool communities that have sprung up. So two particular. So one is called vibecode.law. Listeners, if you go to that site, it is essentially like a showcase of legal tools that people have vibe coded and built. It's very
cool.
Yeah. And it's very much built on the idea
of, I'm checking that out right now.
Of community and inspiration, which I think are like fantastic elements to bring to any industry that's kind of experimenting with stuff. So vibecode.law, really, really good. So if you ever are thinking, you listen to this podcast and you go, where do I get started? Or, how do I do this? It's really good inspiration. And they talk about very openly, okay, I use this tool and I did this, and you can click through some of the projects. So that's really cool. The other one is called Legal Quants. And it's started by Jamie Tso and Raymond Sun, who are,
this group on LinkedIn. Are they pre-AI? I think I've heard of this group before.
Right? They are. They're sort of like, I think it came out via the pandemic. And
I think that's right.
Yeah. And I think it's got sort of supercharged with AI tools and stuff. But the cool part too is also community-based, but very much encouraging and showcasing builders. So people that are experimenting, but showcasing final products. So, I think they have if you go to the About Me page, there's a really cool thing about how, we're comparing, the people using the tools to the type of tools to, like, it's like you're driving a car and the road is the ecosystem. Anyway, it's a really great community. Legal Quants is solid. And then lastly, one of the things I'll recommend, which can be a bit tough, but as you can imagine, I have a background in hackathons, is there are events, there's people just kind of putting stuff together. So these types of tools, and we've seen this a lot at Brighter, one of the most popular things to do with vibe coding now is get a bunch of people in a room, buy some pizzas and allocate some time and just get them building and imagining and experimenting.
Not a hackathon without pizza.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm a lawyer and I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to be like the king of vibe coding.
Yeah.
Is there like a certain mindset I should have to get it right?
Yes. Yeah, there is. I think one is you got to be ready to fail. It's also like an old, the old saying, but like you're not going to get it first time. But that's kind of the cool thing about AI in general, that I think it's also a mental shift people have gone through now with using Claude or ChatGPT to find something versus Google, is it's a conversation. Is that vibe coding also follows those rules where if you don't get it right the first time, that's the point of it. It's meant to be iterative. It's meant to show you something. Okay, based on the words and prompt you gave me, is this what you're looking for? And then you it's a conversation. No, it's not, actually in real life, this document's generated after they intake this information. It's a process. So one idea is just go with the flow, go with the process, try and experiment. So that's one thing. The other thing, which I would really encourage people to do, which is really tough for lawyers, and I can say this because like I even struggle with it still, is that we tend to, and especially lawyers that have been doing a practice for a while, like I've been doing M&A transactions forever. I know it's a very complicated process. I'm going to try and vibe code that whole thing. Like, don't try and boil the ocean. Start simple.
Very lawyer thing to do. Yeah.
It's such a lawyer thing where we try and we also psych ourselves out to think that, well, if I just do this little part of it, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Like, it's like the opposite of improv, right? You want people to just be saying yes and growing from there, but you got to start with just one small idea. So one thing I really encourage lawyers, I want to be the champion of vibe coding. I want to be the person at my firm to grab a hold of this, is find the thing in your practice that you know about that you don't do 10 times a year. Find the thing you're doing 10 times a day or a couple times a week across different people. Like, find the pain point that is high volume, but low complexity, and the level of sophistication that you can put into a prompt to get something higher quality out of those types of problems. Huge. Yeah.
Max, this was fun. Thanks for coming on the show. Time flies, doesn't it?
This is a blast.
Vibe coding.
It's great. And you know what? We do this podcast next week. It's going to change in a month after that. It's going to change. This is happening like so fast. Yeah.
Weekly shows. Today, everybody, we spoke with Max Paterson from Brighter. For more from Max and Brighter, visit brighter.com. That's BRYTER.com, brighter.com. You want to be brighter, right? Join us for our next episode when I'll tell you about that time I was in Marvin Berry's band for the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. That was a hell of a time. Or we'll just do another legal tech Q&A. I suppose that's probably safer. Talk next time, everybody.